Hey guys, in this section of the lecture, we're going to look at getting to know your characters as you read, whether it's for Dracula or for the short stories we're working on. So there are 5 ways that authors might write about a character, 5 kind of narrative voices they might use. In the first person present, an author will write as though they are the character, so using I and we. They'll write as though things are happening as you read. First person past, same thing. They use I and we, but they talk about events in the past. Now, first person narrators can be really, really interesting to work with. And you'll see that a lot in Dracula. That's primarily what we're doing, is working with first person narrator. A really good author will build their character as that narrator, so they're not always going to be the character, that is not always going to be honest with you. They're not always going to give you all of the information that you need. They're not always going to give you the only interpretation of events. If you think about it, it's kind of like if you're meeting a new person or if you're talking to somebody else. You might tell people your understanding of events. You might leave some stuff out to make yourself look better or kind of alter things. And that's really human nature. So a good author will know that and work on doing the same kinds of things. That's why often people who do literary analysis a lot will talk about working with an unreliable narrator, a narrator who you can't entirely trust, or a narrator whose words you want to dig into a little more. The next 2 sets are both third person. You might have third person limited or third person omniscient. Both of those will can narrate in either the past or the present tense. A third person limited narrator will follow the character through their activities, through all of the events, and will really be focused on that character. Very commonly, a third person limited narrator will only know what happens to the character that they're following, so they can't really give you a big picture view. That can be especially true if the third person narrator is actually another character in the story, telling you the story of the character that the story focuses on. Now, the final piece is going to be a second person narrator. I've only ever seen this done in the present, although it's totally possible that this happened in some other tense. A second person narrator puts you in the driver's seat. It's a text that says, you do this and then you do that, right? You walk into the cave, you see a treasure chest, you open the treasure chest. Those are not common kinds of narrators that you see in literature. They are very common in things like choose your own adventure books. The big thing I'd like you to think about as you move forward is that each of these types of narrators, these different ways of writing about a character, will give you different perspectives and ideas about the way the character works, or will leave certain things out that are really significant. Okay, so let's look a little bit at some works that introduce characters from novels. As we go, I'd like you to consider what is stated and what's implied in these character introductions. Does the physical description tell you anything about the character's personality? Does the character's personality play a larger role in the description? How do you learn about this character as you read about them? Now, this is where that worksheet is going to start coming into play. I've given you 3 different descriptions. We're going to read them together. I'm going to give you the chance after each one to pause and go write your own thoughts down. Ready? Oh, one more slide. I thought we were there. All right. So also think about this. It's important to notice how the character is presented, how others interact with him, her, or it. But it's also important to make the connection with the character for yourself. Do you like them or not? Can you relate to them or not? All right, now we're ready for the first example. So this will be on your worksheet under the Golden Compass's description of Lord Asriel. Here we go. Lord Asriel was a tall man with powerful shoulders, a fierce dark face, and eyes that seemed to flash and glitter with savage laughter. It was a face to be dominated by or to fight, never a face to patronize or pity. All his movements were large and perfectly balanced, like those of a wild animal. And when he appeared in a room like this, he seemed a wild animal held in a cage too small for it. Go ahead and pause the video right now. Put some notes down. Think again, how do you react to this character? What do you learn about the character from the description of him? Are you seeing personality being reflected in this description? How is personality reflected if so? Okay, pause. All right. I hope you got your description written down and you're back with me. Let's go on to the second one. This one is from a book called Neverwhere. This will be Neverwhere's description of Mr. Croup and Mr. Vandemar. And here it is. There are 4 simple ways for the observant to tell Mr. Croup and Mr. Vandemar apart. First, Mr. Vandemar is 2.5 heads taller than Mr. Croup. Second, Mr. Croup has the eyes of a faded china blue, while Mr. Vandemar's eyes are brown. Third, while Mr. Vandemar fashioned the rings he wears on his right hand out of the skulls of 4 ravens, Mr. Croup has no obvious jewelry. Fourth, Mr. Croup likes words, while Mr. Vandemar is always hungry. Also, they look nothing alike. So here again, think about your initial impressions. Think about how the description serves both to let us visualize these people and to let us get to know more about them. Go ahead and write your reflection. Pause now. Okay, are you ready for the final one? The final one comes from Lord of the Rings. It's going to say Lord of the Rings' description of Elrond on the worksheet. And here it is. The face of Elrond was ageless, neither old nor young, though in it was written the memory of many things both glad and sorrowful. His hair was dark as the shadows of twilight, and upon it was set a circlet of silver. His eyes were gray as a clear evening, and in them was a light like the light of stars. So go ahead and pause here. Write some reflections about what you think as you read this. How are you learning about Elrond? And we'll be back to talk about this more when you finish that writing. Pause now. All right. Are you back with us? So I want to go back through and look at these descriptions now. You should already have your thoughts written down. It doesn't help if you just watch this and write down what I say. So let's go back through this. I really like the Lord Asriel description because the words that come into play, the way that the author describes how we should react to him, I think really paint a super duper clear picture of who this guy is. So we've got this fierce face. We've got eyes that glitter with savage laughter. And then down below, they describe him as moving like a wild animal that's held in a cage too small for it. So overall, that starts giving us a really, I think, intense picture of who this character is. We then also, in the middle there, get that description of how we're supposed to react to his face. It's a face to be dominated by or to fight, right? Those are the 2 responses this author is giving us. I think when that kind of response is added into a description, it does some really interesting things for how we understand the character. It may, for some of us, make us immediately want to react differently, but it also really tells us, I think, how this author is imagining not only our response, but the responses of other characters in the book, which will then really shape the way this character moves through the book. So I think that's a really fun one. This next one from Neverwhere, I just love it because, we get to the end and it says they also look nothing alike. So why is he describing them so much? I think really the big thing is to give us some really interesting snapshots. So we start with those really physical descriptions, right? One of them's taller than the other. One of them has somewhat poetically described eyes, the other one has brown eyes. And then we start getting these little personality quirks, right? Mr. Vandermarsh fashioned his rings out of the skulls of 4 ravens. That's unusual. And then we have these traits like one of them likes words, one of them's always hungry. As you read this, I think it starts telling some stories for us, especially those raven skulls, but some of the other ones too. That idea about words and being hungry, I think that really puts one of them in a much more mental realm, one of them in a much more physical realm. So I think this one's a pretty fun description. Finally, we've got Elrond. He's ageless, neither old nor young. His hair is dark as the shadows of twilight. And then we've got this circle of silver, which to me always really evokes the moon. We've got more nighttime, more evening description, right? His eyes were gray as a clear evening, and in them was a light like the light of stars. I think in some ways that connection to not just any nature, but what we see at night, the moon and the stars, really emphasizes that agelessness. It also starts showing Elrond's connections to other characters. If you've seen the movies or the books, he has connections to 2 different women who are described as stars. The elves tend to be connected a lot with mostly dusk and nighttime. So I think there we see some really interesting traits coming into this character as well. So we have one more lecture to go for this series in the Introduction to Literature. Make sure this worksheet is caught up and then come join me for working with character. I'll see you there.